Hello and welcome to this new video. My name is John and I'm a Fortify presets consultant. And in this video, I want to show you how you can install the Fortify Software Security Center on Kubernetes using Helm. So let's get right into it. At the beginning, maybe some more general information. So anything that I will show in this video, from documentation to some commands that you maybe need, is linked down in the description. So please have a look at the description to see everything that is publicly available. And you can also use the timestamps in this video to go directly to the topic that you want to go. But I would highly recommend to you watch the whole video if you never worked with the SSC on Kubernetes before. Yeah, and with that, I think we can start with the first point, and that is the agenda. So let's have a look at what we will cover in this video. So first of all, we will talk about components and requirements that you need to actually start running. So what kind of components do you need to start with the Software Security Center on Kubernetes, and how the whole installation process works. So just to give you a short overview about how everything works and what kind of requirements we have. At the next point, we talk about, or I will show you how the installation looks like. So we will have a look at the demonstration. And in this demonstration, I will use the gcloud environment to run everything, so the installation on gcloud using also Kubernetes and Helm. And the last but not least point is that I want to provide you some tips and tricks how you can have a look at the logs maybe for the SSC. So some tips, tricks, and also I want to show you how you can actually debug everything that is maybe helpful for you. So with that, let's get right into the first topic, and that is the components. So let's talk about the components. So what do you actually need to run the Software Security Center on Kubernetes? So how does it work? So first of all, of course, you need some kind of Kubernetes engine. Of course, we want to run the SSC on Kubernetes, so we need a Kubernetes engine. And it doesn't matter if you want to install it on your local machine, or if you want to use some services like AWS, Azure, or as in our case, gcloud. So you need some kind of Kubernetes engine, at least one node, of course, where you can run the Software Security Center pod. And that is actually the next step. So our goal is to run the Software Security Center pod or pods using Helm. So this is the main goal, but to do this, we need some other things inside of our Kubernetes space. And the first thing that we need for that is the persistent volume. So normally when you restart the pod inside of Kubernetes, it will delete all the files inside of the pod. And for that, we need some kind of persistent volume to store some data that we need every time the pod restarts or a new pod is created. So something like the configuration file or the log files that should be stored persistently. So for that, we need a persistent volume. The next thing, the secrets, is responsible for storing everything regarding licenses or connections to the database, for example, so username, password, so everything like this. And it's also very important when it comes to SSL or the HTTPS, because the Software Security Center on Kubernetes only runs on HTTPS, so it is required to have a TLS or SSL connection. So and all these information, so the trust store, the key store, the license file is stored in this secrets file. And the last but not least thing here is the ssc-values.yaml file. And this file is used to store or to set all parameters for our Helm chart. So we're using Helm to create the Software Security Center because we provide the Helm chart for that. And we need to give the Helm chart some data to actually set the SSC up. But we will have a look at the ssc-values.yaml file later. but that's the basics that we need in the Kubernetes space or Kubernetes and Helm space. But of course, we want to store some results in our SSC. And for that, we need a database. So you can actually run this database also in Kubernetes, of course. But in this case, we are using an external database. So the very important part here is that you need a SSC database that you can use. And very important here is that you need to use the same database or the same SSC version on your database, like in your Kubernetes environment, of course, because otherwise you will get some errors. But yeah, the SSC database is responsible for storing all the results, for example, or users. So that is very important. And when it comes to users, we also want to grant access the software security, or we want to grant access users to the Software Security Center. So for that, we need some kind of service to get outside of this bubble here. And for that, we are using some kind of service like a load balancer, cluster IP, or port. So that are components from Kubernetes to actually allow us the connection to the outside world. And with that, we are able to grant the users access to the SSC. And that is the main overview about all the components. So there are some more details, but this is just the basic understanding that you need to know. And the next thing are the requirements. So what do we need to get this kind of overview here, or how get we everything running? And for that, we need some things. First of all, we need an SSC database and also the access to the database, because we need to talk to the SSC database and maybe read or write or only view some rows there. So it's very important that we have first the database and then the access. The next thing is, of course, as I mentioned, the whole Kubernetes space. And inside of that space, we need some kind of service like the load balancer, cluster IP, or node port, where we can talk to the outside. So this is our way to the outside. And yeah, that is required. The next thing is the persistent volume support. So you need to be able to create a persistent volume for the SSC. So it's very straightforward. The next thing regarding secrets. You need to make sure that you have your Fortify license available and also your key store. So everything that you need for your HTTPS connection, so your SSL certificate, of course, because we need to store that in our secrets file. Or in our Kubernetes secret. And the next thing that you need to have is the Helm chart itself. So this is actually a file that you can get inside of the installation folder of the SSC. So let's have a look at that. So I already had this on my machine. So if you download the SSC from your portal, you will get this Fortify version X server war tomcat.zip file, and inside of this zip file there are some directories. And if you have a look at the Helm directory, there is this SSC minus version blah blah blah. And you need this file because this actually provides the Helm charts. So if you have a look inside of here, you can see that here are all the files that you need. But yeah, this is the first thing that you need. And of course, the SSC values example file is also inside of here. So yeah, that's regarding the Helm chart. The next thing that you need is the Docker account, because the SSC Docker container is actually private. So you need to make sure that you have access to the Docker container. And the last thing that is required in here is the DNS. So if you want to run it on a host name instead of an IP address, you need, of course, a DNS that you can set up there. And there are also some other things that we need on our machine to actually install everything. And that is, of course, kubectl to talk to the Kubernetes engine. Then we need Helm to actually use Helm, of course, and Docker to run everything. So these are all the requirements. So this is just a basic overview. If you want to have a detailed overview, please have a look at our documentation. So I can also show it to you. Just 1 second. So yeah, if you go to the link in the description, you can get to this documentation where you can find everything very detailed regarding the requirements. And if you want to have an deeper overview about all the installation process that we will go ahead now, you can also have a look at the Docker container, where you can find a README file, and there's also this there are also the requirements, but also how you can actually deploy the Fortify SSC to a Kubernetes cluster. So with that, I think we're done with the first step to show you how everything works, and now we can go and practice. So as I said, here you can find everything that you need to know. So everything that I will show in this video is listed down here. So yeah. So with that, I think we can switch into the Google Cloud environment. So this is the environment that we use to run our Kubernetes cluster. So I already created a project in here. So this is called ssc minus Kubernetes, very straightforward. And how Google Cloud Platform works is that you have this project, and inside of this project, you have some services like the Kubernetes engine that we're using to create our Kubernetes cluster. So we need to go to the Kubernetes engine, and where I already enabled the Kubernetes engine, and where we can just click on create to create our new Kubernetes cluster. So let's go to the standard configuration. That's completely fine. And where we can set all the information that we need. So first of all, let's set a very nice and small name. Just name it cluster SSC, that's fine. We will use a server in Europe because it's more closely to my location. And we are going to use, let's say, a static version, and then the 9.19.9 Google Cloud, Google Kubernetes engine. That's completely fine for us because this is also the one that is supported by the SSC. And the next thing that we need to set up here is the pool of nodes that we actually want to run. So we only need one because we only want to run the SSC. One very, very important information here is that it's only possible to use one pod accessing the database. So it is not supported that multiple pods access the database and change or read some data. So this is very, very important to mention. And another very important thing to mention here is, of course, that in this video I gonna set up a demo environment, so test project, and I would not recommend to use this in production. So please use this video to understand the process. It's and have a look at the process in the demo. But yeah, there are some things that you need to change for a production environment. But yeah, please have a look at the documentation or contact us if you need some more information for that. But coming back to the Google Cloud Platform, yeah, we will set up just one node. That's completely fine. And we are going to use a node with, let's say, 8 CPUs and 32 gigabytes of RAM. That should be more than enough for our case. And we will use just 50 gigabytes for the disk size. So if you want to have a more closer look what kind of machine configuration you need in your case, please have a look at the documentation. I will also link down below a sizing guide, because you can also have a look at our normal SSC requirements also in regarding of the database size or the size of the server. So if you can't find anything Kubernetes specific, please have a look at the normal ssc documentation. And yeah, with that, I think we're done. Here's nothing that we need to change. Yeah, so let's click on create, and this will create our new Kubernetes cluster. And as I said, you can also run this on your local machine. So at this point, we only created this Kubernetes cluster, and from now you can also use, of course, your local environment from that. So in the meantime, this is created. It's being created. We are going to talk about what kind of environment we use for the next steps. So I'm going to use the Visual Studio Code. So this is very easy to read and easy to use. And you can see we have all our different files in here that I will talk later about. And you can also see that we have a terminal open. And this is a Ubuntu machine on my Windows 10. So you can also use PowerShell if you want, or anything else. Just you only need a terminal where kubectl and Helm and all these things are installed. And yeah, this is the environment that we are going to use now. So this can take a couple of minutes. So I will just fast forward this, and we will go ahead when the cluster is ready. Okay, so we are back. Our cluster is now ready to go, and we can connect to the cluster if we click here on the name and just click on connect, and we can copy this one here and paste it in here. So we are using gcloud, which has his own command line utilities that we are using, but yeah, from that on we can use the same commands as you if you want to use it on your local machine or in another Kubernetes environment. So the first thing that we need to do, or the first thing that I want to do, is to make things a little bit easier, and that is to set an alias. So we will set an alias called k. So I don't want to type kubectl every time. So now I can just use k instead of kubectl, and can use this. But let's start first of all with the Docker login, because as I mentioned, the Docker container of the SSC web app is private. And the first thing that we need to do if we have internet access is to create a Docker login. So the first thing that we need to do is simply use Docker login to log in, of course. So the username should be fine, and I'm typing in the password, and after that you see the login succeeded. And the next thing that we need to do is create an secret for our Kubernetes environment that we are using to get access to the Docker container. So we need to go in here, and where is the Docker directory. So if we have a look at Docker, we can see that here's our config.json, and that is exactly that we need. So I will go back and copy paste the command in here and explain you what it does. So it will create a Docker secret called regcred, and it will use this config.json that I showed you in this folder here. And yeah, it is in Kubernetes secret. So with that, we will create our secret that is using the config.json file, which includes the login data for Docker. So that's the first thing that we need to do. So it can take some time, because this is actually the first time that I'm using kubectl. But this was successfully. So the next thing that we need to do is create another secret. And for that secret, we need to provide some data. So I created a folder inside of my environment here. So when we go back into the ssc Kubernetes, where I created a secrets folder. And inside of the secrets folder, I provide anything that we need to create this secret. So the first thing that we need is our Fortify license. The next two things in here are the key stores for my SSL certificate. So in this case, this is a self-signed certificate, and this is exactly why this is not an production video, only a test environment video. So in my case, I'm using a self-signed certificate to make things easier, but of course, in a production environment, that should be a normal CA authorized certificate. But in our case, we only need the key store and the keys with store password. And the last thing that we need to provide is the ssc autoconfig file. And this in this autoconfig file, let's have a look at the autoconfig file here. So in this autoconfig file, you can see we have some different properties regarding the app and the data source. Very important here is mainly the data source properties, because here you set your database connection. So you set the database username and the database password. So this is now in clear text. Of course, you can use some system variables if you're using your local environment, for example, but you can also use some variables from other services. But in this case, so in other words, at the end of the day, it is in clear text, but you can use some other variables to refer to this password, for example. And you also need to set the JDBC URL. So you need to set your SQL server. So in my case, I'm using an SQL server. And this is the IP address of the SQL server, the default port. So that should be fine. And my database is called SSC. So when we have a look at my database, so I'm using the SQL Server Management tool just to connect to the database. So when I type in the username and the password, we can see under databases we have our SSC database, and that is actually the database that we are going to use. So you can easily provide, check if the database is available. So please make sure that this database is of course available. So you need some kind of connection there. And there are many other things that you can set up here, but you can also have a look at our documentation regarding this. So when you go into the user guide of the Software Security Center, so this is the normal documentation, you can have a look at this tab called Automating Fortify Software Security Center Configuration, and you can have a look at everything that that you could include. And this also means if you're using another database server, like Oracle one, you need to set something else than if you're using an MS SQL, like in our example. So please have a look at this documentation. But what the SSC configuration, the SSC autoconfig basically does is very easy, because normally you have all these installation steps or configuration steps after you install the Fortify Software Security Center. So you need to set the database connection, for example, and this is exactly what this autoconfig file does. So it will automatically configure your SSC with these settings in here. So of course you will have access to this instantly, so you don't need to set up anything like in a normal SSC configuration. And this is why you need to provide this autoconfig file. And yeah, in this case, we only need to set our database server in here, so that should be fine. And now we are able to create our secret that we are going to use in our ssc deployment. So I will go back to our folder from before, so where we have our secrets folder, and I will just create a basic secret, generic secret called ssc secrets from file and then the directory secrets. And now we can have a look at our secrets. So we can see that our rec cred that is responsible for the Docker login and our ssc secrets is there. And we can also, of course, have a look at what's inside there. So if we type in k-describe ssc secrets, we can see, secrets, I forgot, and what did I forgot? Describe secret, sure. And there you can see we included the Fortify license, the key store password, the key store itself, and the autoconfig.yaml. So with that, we are finished with the secret. So the first thing that we need to provide, and the other thing that we need to provide, is the ssc values file. So this file is the main file that we are going to use to deploy everything using Helm. And when we have a look at the file here, we can see some different things, but let me explain what is what. So first of all, you need to set up an image, what kind of image you want to pull. So you can use the Fortify Docker image, but if you're not in an environment with an internet connection, you can also save this Docker image to your local installation and use this. But this is also described in this in the documentation here if you're using an air-gapped installation. But in our case, we have an internet connection, so we are using just the standard Fortify Docker /ssc image. You can also set a tag if you want. So in our case, this is just comment out, but you can use a specific tab if you want. So you can just use one of these tags in here. If not, it will use the latest one, of course. And the next thing, or the last thing in the image section, is the pull policy. So if the image is not on the machine, this what should Kubernetes or Helm then does is it will pull the image. So I set it to if not present. So if it's not on the machine, it will pull the image, but you can also set that it should always pull the image or never if you're using a local image. But yeah, that's pretty straightforward. The next thing that we need to provide is our secret that we created for our Docker login. So we need to make sure that our that we are able to pull the ssc image. So in this case, I created a secret called rec cred. So we are going to use this in here. The next section that we will have a look at is the service section. So this is the service that we need to connect to the outside world, or to make a connection to the outside world. So in our case, we're using a load balancer, but as I said in the beginning, you can also use cluster IP or node port. And we also need to set our HTTP and HTTPS port. And we can also set a fixed service cluster IP address for the cluster IP and also for the load balancer IP. But if this is empty, Kubernetes will automatically assign a value to it. So in our case, we don't need to set this specifically, so we will leave that empty. The next thing that we need to provide is a URL host. So this is your DNS or host name. In our case, we're using just ssc.fortifydemo.com, but we also will go ahead with the IP address. So I don't have set up this host name on this machine. So, but if you want to use host name or DNS, of course, you need to make sure that it is in here. The next thing that is important for some installations is the JDBC driver URI. So this is very important because if you use, for example, an Oracle database, you need to use this JDBC driver file. That is the connection between the database and the SSC server, and you need this file on your machine. So this is the same on here. So if you're using Oracle, you need to set where the driver location or the driver file is located. So in our case, we're using just a standard SQL server, so we don't need that. And I also set the HTTP client certification verification to none. So that should be also straightforward. So the next thing that we need to have a look at is the secrets reference. So this is very important and also maybe a little bit tricky, but I will explain what you can find in there. So the first thing that we need to set is, of course, our secrets name that we defined in the beginning. So this is the secret that we created in here. And we are going to set the license entry. So this is just fortify.license, the autoconfig entry, and if you want to use, you can use the SSC secret key. But what is this secret key? This is very easy because SSC will automatically create this SSC secret key for encrypting the configuration files. So if you set anything like the database connection in your configuration, it will automatically encrypt it with the SSC secret key file. And if you not set it, it will automatically create it. And this is not important for an initial setup, but this is important for a database migration, for example, or not a database migration. It's more the application migration. So if you want to use the same SSC configuration on another server with the same configuration, because you need the secret key file from SSC there to decrypt the configuration files. So I can show that to you a little bit later, but this is very important to know if you want to migrate your SSC installation afterwards, or in this case, if you want to migrate it to Kubernetes. So this is the SSC secret file. So we will go through this if the SSC is up and running. So we will go a little bit deeper in there later. The next thing that we need to set is the key store file and key store password. So this is the file that we also set in here. So as I said, this is a self-signed certificate. So this is basically the key store and just the password, and it's the same for here. So yeah, the next thing that we need to have a look at is the trust store file, because the trust store file in here, so the HTTP trust store file is very important if you're using the X509 client authentication. So this is important if you try to, or want to use it in your environment. So you need to set the HTTP trust store and HTTP trust store password in here for all your X509 client authentication. Then the last thing in the secret section is actually the JVM trust store and password. So this is very important if you want to communicate with another internal service with a private certificate. So if you're using, for example, an LDAP or a bug tracker service inside your internal organization, and this is using a private certificate, you can set this certificate in here, and SSC will use it to connect to these kind of services. So this is regarding the keys. Let's talk about the persistent volume claim. So as I mentioned in the beginning, this is very important because we want to store all our data regarding the configuration and also the log files on this persistent volume. And it will so in the case of the Google Cloud Platform, it will automatically create a persistent volume claim and also a persistent volume. So you don't need to set anything up here. But if you want, of course, you can set your storage class in here. So this is very easy. It's pretty straightforward. And the default value here is 1 GB. But of course, it depends on how big your system is. You can also use the size guide that is linked down in the description. But you only need to have a look at how big are your log files, your configuration files, all these things that needs to be stored on this persistent volume. But in our case, 1 GB is completely enough. And the next thing that you can set up is the environment variables. So these are variables that you can use for anything regarding the pod. So this should be also very straightforward. So if you have something that you want to use for the pod, you can set it up in here. The next thing is the JVM max RAM percentage. So this is actually the memory limit that is to be used by the JVM heap. So we will set our RAM in here. So the requested RAM, so the minimum RAM is 7 GB and the maximum RAM is 28 GB, and you can set how much of this RAM should be used for the JVM heap. So that's pretty straightforward. And yeah, as I said, these are the resources that you can use to set your minimum and maximum resource limits. And yeah, with that, I think we're done. So this is just an example. You can also have a look at all the other things that you can enter in here, but this is also part of the last part of the video, so the tips and tricks. But this is a basic installation or basic values file that we can use for our installation. So, and with that, we can easily go into our terminal again and use Helm install to install it using Helm. So we need to set a name. I will call it just ssc, and we are using the ssc-1 blah 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 Helm chart for the installation, and we need to set our ssc values with the -f, and then ssc values -gke .yaml. And yeah, I think that's it. So let's execute this, and it will automatically create everything that we need. So if we type in kgetall, we will see we've got a new pod, a new service, and a new stateful set for our SSC. So everything that we need to run the SSC. But let's have a look at the SSC, because this at the pod, because this is the most interesting at the first place. So let's type in k describe a pod ssc -web app -0, and we will see, okay, at the beginning there was no persistent volume claim. So in this case, as I said, Google automatically creates ones for us. So on a local installation, this is not be done automatically. So you need to create a persistent volume claim for your own or maybe also persistent volume. But in our case, it will automatically create one for us. So you can see it will automatically assign the SSC web app to the GKE cluster SSC default pool, and also attach the following PVC for us. And after that, it will start to pull the image. So it will use the latest version, 20.2. The pull was successful, and now it creates the container web app. And now we can have a look at the logs of the web app. So if we want to go there, we can just type in k-logs -f to have a continue view on the logs, and type in the name of the pod. And oh, it's already up, so we don't need this -f anymore. But you can see here is anything that we also see in a normal SSC installation. So we can see that the startup was successfully. And let's have a look at the services now. So let's get a get all, and we see the pod is already up and running. And the load balancer that we set in our ssc values file here is also up and running. So we set the load balancer in here. And the cool thing about Google Cloud is also that it will automatically assign an external IP address to the load balancer. So that could be also in a local installation, it could be different. But in regards of the Google Cloud platform, we have an external IP address. And if we open this up now, so using HTTPS, we see that the potential security risk is ahead because we are using a self-signed certificate. But in your case, and also in the production case, that should be not the case. So, but in this case, I accept the risk, and we can see the Fortify Software Security Center is already up and running. And as this is a database that I used in another system before, I can also already log in with my credentials. So type in my password and username. We can, oh, this was the wrong one, sorry. So let's type in the right password. And now we can see that everything is there. So this is our complete new fresh SSC web application using Kubernetes. And we can also have a look at our applications. There is just one, but we can start to use the SSC in here. So yeah, that's it. So that was the whole installation process. This is very, very easy, and should be straightforward. But yeah, let's go into the last section of this video, and that is the tips and tricks and how to actually debug some things. So I already showed you some useful commands that you can use. So the first is, of course, to kubectl describe and then your pod. But you can also, of course, have a look at the logs that I showed you before. The next thing that you maybe need to know, that is especially important for debugging, is how you can actually get into this container that is up and running. So it is possible to get inside of the pod. And for that, you only need to say, okay, kubectl exec, then -it for interactive, and then our pod ssc web app -0, and then we can set anything that we want regarding the shell that we want to use, because with this command we are able to get inside of our pod using the normal bash shell. So in this case, this is a Linux machine. Of course, this could be that in other cases you're using PowerShell, but this is a normal bash. And if we execute this, we can see that we are now inside of our SSC web app. And in here, we can also see that there are some folders. So if we go into SSC, we can see that there are a lot of folders that we can now use. So first of all, the logs that are very interesting. So let's go into the logs folder, where we have all the different logs for the that you also see in a normal SSC installation. And we can maybe have a look at SSC seeding log, or not using tail cat SSC seeding, and where we can see that all these different seed bundles were seeded into the database or into the application. And yeah, from that you're able to read all the normal logs and to do some more debugging. But you can also have a look at the configuration. So if you are going into the configuration folder, you can see some things in here. First of all, we have our app properties or data source properties. But what I mentioned before is the secret.key that was created by the installation of SSC, because this is used to encrypt the different connections. So let's have a look at maybe the data source properties, and where you can see that, let's look, the database username and password. So you can see this is already encrypted by default, and this is by using the SSC secret key. And this is why it is important, if you want to use this configuration on another server, that you also move or copy the SSC secret file. So, but yeah, in the data source properties file, you can also have a look at all the different things and all the different configurations regarding the database itself. So yeah, this is very, very helpful to have a look inside of the pod actually and see what happens there. But let's exit here. The next or the last thing that I want to show you regards of how to debug or tips and tricks is how you can actually have a look at what kind of variables you can add to the ssc values file. For that, there are two ways to do that. First of all, you can have a look at, of course, the different templates inside of the folder. So when I go in here, we can see, if we go in our Helm chart, we can find some files like the chart or values, YAML. So the chart is just a metadata file, but the values file is just an example file. But here you can also see some things that are not in the normal example file, because this values file is basically the file that will be used if some of these parameters are empty in your installation. So that means if you're not using some kind of, let's say, max percent, JVM max RAM percentage, it will use just 86%. But you can also see that here are some other things that you can use that are Kubernetes specific. So you can also set a specific node to run everything on. And yeah, that's maybe helpful for you to understand. But let's have a look at all the other templates in here. So if we go to the templates, we can see everything that we see. If we can that we can also have a look at our system. So the first thing is, of course, the persistent volume that we can, or the persistent volume claim that we can see in here, because it will automatically create a persistent volume claim. And this is the file that we set in our ssc values file in here. So this is here, 1 GB. So we can see it used this template, the template to actually create this file. And you can also have a look at the service and also the web app. That's very interesting to get a deeper understanding how everything works and how everything links together. So how you link the variables to the actual variables that are used inside of the SSC. And the last thing that I want to show you is, so we already had a look at the describe function. So describe port ssc web app -0, where we can see everything regarding the events or also anything regarding the container. So everything that we already set in our ssc values file. So we can see we set an requested CPU of 1, memory of 7 gigabytes, and so on. Here are our secrets. But this is, of course, nice to read, but this is not nice to use for other things in your system. And for that, you can easily export this describe function into a YAML file. So you can say -o for output, say YAML, and then save the whole file into ssc, let's say output.yaml. And if we do that, we should get get pod. And now we can see our new file that is in here, the ssc output file. So in here we can see everything which we saw in the describe section. So just as basic or as a nice and clean YAML file. So you can work with this file to use it for further things. But the last thing that I want to show you is that you can also have a look. So I already showed you that you can have a look at the chart and the values file, but you can also use, of course, just a normal Helm command for that. So Helm show values and then ssc minus, so the Helm chart itself, and there you can see the same things in here. Yeah, I think that's it. So I hope this was helpful, and now you're able to actually set up SSC on Kubernetes using Helm yourself. If you have any questions, please let us know in the comments. And as I mentioned, please have a look at the description for all links that you need. And I think that's it. So please make sure to subscribe to this channel to don't miss any video in the future. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.